us the opportunity to speak about healthcare. And my name is Arthur Mozowski, and I'm a 35-year veteran here in the Silicon Valley doing all kinds of different things. Currently I'm running the Silicon Hill Venture. I also am the advisor to Aspire Global Ventures, which is a $100 million venture fund created by ladies that are also affiliated with this network. But it's not about me. It's about solving an issues in the healthcare, which is pretty much ongoing thing. Visited recently the TechCrunch here in San Francisco, and actually, interestingly enough, most of the discussion that I've seen the startups were in healthcare. So that's kind of encouraging for this platform. But in any event, let me introduce the panelists and let them actually talk about themselves. So rather than me talking about them, and we'll have about 2.5 minutes for each one of the members to introduce themselves. So let me start with Mary.
Thanks, Arthur. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you have to speak up probably.
Can you hear me?
Is the light on?
Yeah,
Yes.
it's on.
Yeah.
Try this one.
Or you can use the one I was using.
Okay. This one.
How about this one? Oh, much better. Hi, I'm Mary Wheeler, founding managing director of BioRock Ventures, running Fund 2 right now. So what we do is we invest seed and then Series A checks into therapeutic startups, developing breakthrough treatments for serious disease. And we're currently headquartered right here in Palo Alto. So it's fun to see you guys here. Quick background, it sounds like, as well. After getting a PhD and MBA, I spent several decades in operating roles, mainly in M&A, acquiring startups like the ones I'm now investing in. So running M&A for both, was a founder in a startup on the East Coast of the US, medium-sized public company, and then very large company, J&J. I see some former colleagues in the room. Before moving on to being an angel investor. Have some good track record as an angel investor before starting BioRock Ventures Fund 1. And again, now we're at Fund 2. So I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mary. And then I'd like to move on to Vadim.
Start there. Hi, everyone. So my name is Vadim. I'm the founder and CEO of Bench2Bio. So this is a consultancy where I work with early stage biotech startups to help them on all things related to strategy, fundraising, and partnerships. So my story is probably a bit atypical for pharma or biotech. I actually started my career coding and studied computer science and economics. I had a brief stint in finance and structured credit, and then got interested in healthcare. So I've been fortunate to work across first on the payer side, doing health policy research. Then I spent several years working abroad in Africa on expanding access to HIV and malaria medications. And then spent my formative years in Pfizer, spanning different roles in business development, analytics, and then corporate strategy for the hospital business unit and the vaccines business unit. I spent a little bit of time at BeiGene, where I was fortunate to work closely with John Euler, the CEO there, on various special projects. And then in my last role, before starting Bench2Bio, I was Chief Business and Operating Officer at Concarlo Therapeutics, which is a preclinical oncology biotech here in New York. So great to meet, I guess, to see everyone virtually.
Oh, thank you very much, Vadim. Norm, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you. My name's Norm Friedland. I'm based in New York. By background and training, I'm a venture capital technology transfer attorney. Was in that space since before the fax machine, focusing mostly on healthcare, starting to work with venture firms like Channing Weinberg, the First Boston Group, Morgan Stanley, Montgomery Securities, and pretty much represented the whole spectrum of players in healthcare venture capital. And the turning point for my career and what I'm doing now with Full Sky Partners happened when I was advising Dr. Luc Montagnier, who invented or who discovered the AIDS virus, and realized at that point that really smart people and committed people who were creating opportunities for important social change and health benefits, either individually or with startup life science companies, we're really we're at a tremendous disadvantage when they were trying to talk to the venture capital ROI investors. So left the law firm and started Full Sky Partners, which is an impact investment advisory firm. And our focus is on positioning companies, mostly in a startup early stage, that have commercial potential, but also social importance, social deliverables in healthcare, and positioning them to get what I call non-predatory financing, which for this panel we'll call mission financing, which is funding that comes out of the private foundations within family offices, which are deployed not as grants, but as program-related investments, which is an IRS-approved qualified distribution, which can be made to a for-profit company for a mission agenda. And what we're doing is we're combining mission financing, mission capital, with market rate capital to really accelerate patient deliverables in the life science space. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Norm. I'm going to start with here locally in Palo Alto with a question to Mary. Mary, I find this interesting term of the Valley of Death concept, right? And what does it mean for the patient, and how is your fund helping it to address the issue?
Sure. Can you guys?
Let's try this one.
Here we go.
I think it's good.
Can you guys hear me okay? Nope.
Oh, well, that's right.
I'll use the magic microphone. Okay. So yeah, the Valley of Death. I think almost I think all of the panelists are addressing this challenge in healthcare and specifically therapeutics for BioRock at least in different ways. So it's actually a really neat topic to speak about. So when we're developing innovative medicines and other technologies to help treat serious diseases, especially in therapeutics, I've seen throughout my career that the stage between the academic research and when you're actually running a well-funded company is really tough to bridge, right? So that the metaphor of the Valley of Death, right? And I started BioRock because I had to say no to so many amazing founders working on important treatments for serious diseases who needed a small amount of initial capital. For a variety of reasons, the system in therapeutics right now is not well set up to write small, smart, well-resourced in terms of expertise as well as money behind these first steps, like 250K, 500K, a couple million, very hard for these founders to raise. So BioRock Ventures is a traditional venture fund in the sense that, you know, we have LPs, and happy to talk to anybody who is interested in learning more about that. And then we invest those checks and also bring good advice, advocacy, you know, the traditional VC, you know, helping them with hiring, et cetera, post-funding. And there's just not a lot of funds that write these small checks, so I hope there will be more, in addition to some of the other panelists' efforts, which can be combined to help these companies.
Thank you very much, Mary. Actually, I wanted to continue the topic with you, Vadim, because you seem to be also in the early stage, like the smaller amounts of monies and that you guys are investing in. And can you tell us a little bit more about what it is, which subject, and where it is that you're putting your money in?
Absolutely. So, you know, at Bench to Bio for now, you know, we're not investing, but, you know, what Mary highlighted was really my motivation for starting Bench to Bio, because having been in different sides of this industry, both as a venture partner, both, you know, at a large corporation like Pfizer, and then having been on the fundraising kind of trail myself, I see that, you know, this Valley of Death, it's very real. And I'm speaking to founders every day, every week, So I have very kind of, this is very near and dear to me because, I'm hearing this from different companies at different levels of their growth stages. So, for early companies, as Mary highlighted, they're struggling to get that very first check for someone to say, that we'll take a bet on you, right? And we're not doing the exact ROI calculations yet, that we're aligned with your mission, we're aligned with the disease that you're going after. And it's important to us, so we're making a strategic bet on you and as a scientist and on the company. For companies that are a bit more mature, for them, the goalposts, at least from what I observed, the goalposts have moved over the past year and a half as we've been in this funding cycle where, beforehand, they went to the larger VC and they said, okay, come back to us when you have more data. Come back to us when you have safety data, for instance. And now they've gone through that and they've ran the experiments and they come back a year later and they're hearing that, well, this is great, but can you come back to us now when you have efficacy? And, for them, this is a real struggle because this forces them to make some very difficult decisions on how to survive and progress in a market like this to meet the milestones until they could raise additional funding. So I think this is really, a big pain point, but I think it would also, to be optimistic, I think this is a potential opportunity, especially for the audience here, because it's an opportunity to back real good science, because the science is still there, the patient need is certainly there, and so I think it would be a pity if we let this prevent all that innovation that's happening at the bench from getting to patients.
Well, thank you very much, Vadim. I think that Norm has the solution for this. He has this hybrid, right? You have a hybrid family office, philanthropy. Tell us about it. What's your approach to solving this big problem?
So thank you. And so just to take a step back, I think for today and tomorrow, the audience is hearing about strategic investments in various categories, mining and gold and art and all, financial services. What I'm looking to have this audience understand is that the philanthropic assets that are in those family offices can really be deployed collectively in a way that minimizes risk, that maximizes mission for a particular disease category, that can deliver real patient solutions, not in 10 or 15 years, but literally tomorrow. And Vadim and I have been talking about how to brand this, and I want to use the term FINO. Failure is not an option, because when we talk to these companies that have these solutions, we're talking about the survival of patients. We're talking about the survival of kids. We're talking about the survival of mothers who have breast cancer when they're 30 years old, fathers when they're 40 years old and are getting a pancreatic cancer. So this is really it's very personal, it's very real, and what we can do, we've looked at the IRS regulations on how to deploy these program-related investments. And thanks to Marty and Arthur, Mary and I are going to be very, very good friends, because this solution or this strategy, I think, is helping her in her mission of crossing the valley of death for these pharma companies, for Vadim, in the counseling that he's doing, and to the extent that anyone in the audience is looking to for a disease in a disease area. It could be cancer, it could be autoimmune, it could be neuro, it could be chronic diseases. This financial structure really does work, and we can put it in place very, very quickly and deliver real impact.
Well, thank you so much, Norm. That sounds really interesting. I wanted to go back to Mary and ask her more about the type of startups that she's investing in. Like, is it diagnostics? Is it therapeutics? Is it medical devices? And what is your what usually is your check looking like? Like, what kind of a size of investment you guys are making?
Sure, thanks. So we are a fund that just invests in drug development companies, right? So they're developing a therapeutic product. We're looking at, Norm mentioned a bit about the timelines. We are focused on, I'm going to reframe it and say, one of the misconceptions about investing in healthcare, I would say regulated products in particular, is that it takes forever to get returns. In a venture fund structure, when you're investing in a product-driven company with experienced founders, which is what BioRock Ventures does, if you have a milestone-based lens, there's actually quite a nice set of data showing that, exits are like 3 to 5 years on average, because what happens is these companies get acquired, which is what I used to do. I used to run M&A deals for these companies. Once, so half of them are preclinical. They have not even been tested in people yet. And the other half are in phase 1 or phase 2. So they are not on the market yet. They don't have the revenue set. Yes, it takes a long time to develop a product, but you can have a really meaningful impact, through something like Norm's work, and through BioRock Ventures get some returns as well. By investing in this space. So consider that when we look at the startups, we're looking for milestone, experienced, and products.
What is the roughly size of the checks that you write?
Size of checks. So for Fund 2, we're going to write a first check that's going to be around $500K. And then we follow on for those that are successful and move to what's typically a Series A, we can invest up to 5 million, so 3 to 5 million per company that's successful.
So I wanted to ask Vadim, what's your current most fashionable project that you're working on right now?
Great question. So I think, I'm interested in a few areas, one of which is applying, AI is obviously a buzzword, but I'm really excited by where it's, using to optimize clinical trials. So clinical trial recruitment, clinical trial optimization, this is a huge bottleneck in our industry. And this is one of the causes for, the valley of death that we're talking about. It costs tens of millions of dollars to run phase 1 trial. It costs millions of dollars to get an asset into clinical trials. So I'm seeing some companies use novel ways of using these AI algorithms to identify patients and better match patients to clinical trials, as well as to help the clinical trial organizations actually run those trials. The other area that I'm really interested in and passionate about is the longevity space. And what I've seen over the past few years is that there's actually convergence, which again makes me optimistic, between what I would call pure play longevity, where they're looking to expand the human lifespan and all these bold agendas, and traditional biotech, which looks to treat a current disease that's having a unmet need in the patient population. So when these two are coming together, we're now seeing either, again, novel uses of technology to improve health outcomes, or traditional therapeutics that are more focused on prevention, or additional medicines that are focused on prevention. I'm hoping that the industry, that will see the industry shift more into prevention from the current area. I think we're getting some background noise.
Great. What about you, Norm? What's going on there with your passion?
Well, the current focus right now is pediatric oncology, which is interesting in a number of ways. Not only is it personal for the families, but it turns out that pediatric cancer research and pediatric cancer solutions has a real benefit to research for the quote mainstream cancers. And people haven't realized that. They look at a pediatric cancer drug and they say, oh, that's a small market. It's not going to be a blockbuster return, which is why mission capital is essential to play a role in funding of that. But if in fact the pediatric drug identifies markers or identifies solutions that can be translated into mainstream cancers, now you have a blockbuster opportunity. So as I say, we're looking at pediatric, we're looking at CNS. Autism is an area that we're very interested in on the diagnostic side as well as on the therapeutic side. And the other point that I would just make to the audience is, and most people probably know this, there are 7,500 recognized disease categories. And right now, for-profit pharma across the world is focusing on solutions for about 10% of those diseases. So you're really looking, when you look at unmet needs, this is unmet needs for a global population, for 6,500 diseases that no one is even thinking about finding a solution for.
Well, thank you, Norm. Thank you, Norm. Go back here to Mary. So tell me, so far, the BioRock ventures, like, what kind of successes have you gotten so far?
Thanks for asking that. But I think it's also helpful for those who are thinking of, stepping into the space to hear that you can make money. So I'm happy to say that you can, if that's your goal, in addition to impact, which is really important and why we're in this space, I think. So for when I was an angel investor, I had 2 investments out of 2 that eventually went public and are now both worth over $1 billion. One was worth over $5 billion. Then with good track record with angel investing as well, DPI, meaning money back to investors, of over 2x so far. BioRock Ventures Fund 1, which is what you asked about, it was started in 2019, and we invested in a company that year at the end of the year that went public in 2022, which was, a difficult one of, I think, less than 20 companies to go public that year. And that company is worth about $500 million right now. We own a substantial portion of that company, and are beginning to and have distributed some returns from that. All of these companies, when I led the investment, were brand new companies. They had just been formed, and we wrote relatively small checks, $250K to $2.5 million in every single one of those. So BioRock Ventures Fund 2 will continue to follow that pattern, invest in the same kinds of companies, the same kind of founders. The most important thing is the impact on the patients, the products that these companies are developing. We have, in the companies I just mentioned, serious infectious disease, where people are ending up in the ICU, where there is no treatment, to something more general, like a better flu vaccine that is in clinical trials, autoimmune cancer, just as Norm said, like, it's a really broad set of disease areas that we can touch with this model. So,
well, thank you, Mary. Vadim, so we're doing the round here. From your perspective, when you look at the current state of the healthcare, is such a broad term, but let's say I would categorize things in the 3 categories, like the therapeutics and prevention, right, and medical devices, maybe 4. So, and then I heard from you things mentioned about AI, which is not very popular thing right now to say, right? Everybody is just doing AI when they walk into the to the meeting with the VCs. But can you tell me of those 4 different categories, including the AI and then big data analytics and IoT, where you think that the trends are heading? Like, what's the most promising out of those 4 areas? Where would you invest?
Absolutely. Thanks, Arthur. So I think, where I'm seeing some companies struggle right now and kind of looking forward to answer your question is, we've had companies that are traditional therapeutics company where they're single asset, single target. And we've had some companies that are pure, platform companies where it's just, AI for drug discovery, for instance, but it's algorithm only. And I've seen in isolation both of those types of companies struggle over the past year or 2. But what could be really successful, and what I'm seeing success in right now, companies that are actually bridging those 2 together, right? Of where they're using novel AI approaches to discover new drugs or new targets, and then actually either partner with established pharmas or invest in-house and use their own capabilities to actually develop drugs. So they end up are being a hybrid of those 2 models. And I think that's a trend that we'll certainly see continue. That's a big one. I think the other kind of one that I'm personally passionate about is something that kind of crosses over into ag tech. So I think, we're seeing a lot of, I think a convergence also. We're starting to recognize that the food we eat, everything that goes, that we come in contact with during the course of a day actually impacts our health, right? And so where I'm excited about is biotech level innovation in some of the quote unquote boring areas like agriculture, like consumer goods, where they're innovating the technologies that are being used to develop those products in a safer way, where we're exposed to less exotoxins that actually, can prevent us from developing the diseases that we're all so busy now as an industry trying to treat. That's a space that's a longer term play, but that's something that I'm very passionate about.
So, Norm, you're the lawyer guy here in the room, right? So you came up with this, you were successful in investments, and then right now you kind of created this incredible hybrid of philanthropy and profit nonprofit in order to accelerate the processes of getting some solutions to certain problems that we have, especially the cancer among the children and so forth. Can you, in a few minutes, explain to us what that hybrid model is, kind of like but in a very simple way? So,
Well,
we don't.
the answer is I'm unlike every other panelist here. I have no expertise in anything. I am a lawyer, and thank goodness I'm not a doctor because they didn't put erasers on the end of scalpels. The structure is very simple. The mission capital comes in a fund structure as a subordinated tranche to the market rate capital. And what that does is that now allows the market rate capital to come into a deal that it can't otherwise justify for their ROI platform. There is a preferred return that they get before the mission capital gets their money back. And if we're partnering with people like Mary in her fund, in her investments, we know there's going to be not only mission success, but financial success. And what that means is that the mission funder, that family office, is going to have that solution for that disease that they are interested in reaching the patient. It's going to reach the patient not in 15 years because of things like AI and all the omics and all the new clinical trial technologies can accelerate drug development by a factor of 10. and reduce the cost of these clinical trials by a factor of 100. And at the end of the day, the mission funder will get both the mission and the return of its capital. And if we structure this correctly, there'll be enough money left over for what I call the Evergreen Trust, which is now a newly funded life science foundation that can support very, very early research, high risk research. That 28-year-old PhD who thinks they can solve something if they only had $100,000, and we'll give them that $100,000 through the Evergreen Trust. It's really a very exciting opportunity. We've talked to very, very serious people about it, and we're appreciative to Marty for letting us speak to everybody today, because this is where the world needs to go. We can't have 6,500 diseases without anybody looking for a solution.
Yeah, I agree. And then, Barry, you're in the pharma, right, side of the things. And then we know that there was a number of FDA not approved drugs that are called phantom. So the drugs that were not, they went through the different stages of the FDA approval, but they didn't quite make it to the final productization phase. And then now there is a way of actually going back to that knowledge base of those, development of those drugs based on the DNA, specific DNA of the people that were sampled, and trying to figure out how they could be applied into some other areas. Is that like a promising and real thing that's happening? Do you know anything about it?
So, I mean, I would just say broadly first, the business and the sort of effort, because it stems from science, of developing treatments for diseases is just always a voracious consumer of innovation of any kind. Just in even our panel, you heard about AI for optimizing clinical trials in so many different ways. There from, I think I'm not exactly sure what you're referring to, don't know the words, but there's plenty of phenomenon like now you can direct the right patient to a trial for a particular drug in a more specific way based on the information that you have about that patient at the genetic, as well as sort of the way they present at the doctor, right? So the phenotype and the genotype. So that will give you more precise findings and therefore increase the likelihood of success of the clinical trials, which, as we all know, take a long time, rightfully so. You need to be careful about this and are expensive. So, the probability of success of any given drug that enters phase 1 of getting approved and into the market and therefore into patients to help them is very low, depending on the indication, less than 10% for sure. Right. So most of them fail. Right. So if there's anything we can do on the clinical trial side, I think that might be what you're referring to, leveraging past data, et cetera, AI, broadly speaking, it's of course a very broad field, AI itself. But before that, I mean, decades and decades of history of biopharma companies, startups, as well as big codes that you would think of brand names voraciously and enthusiastically bringing in different innovations at various stages to try to create a higher level of success in product. Ultimately, what it is product development, right? You've got to get it out there and show that it is safe and that it works for patients.
So Arthur, just to follow up on that, I think the term that you're looking for is repurposing of drugs, repositioning drugs. And just to give you an example, I'm working with a company now where a large pharma company spent over $300 million developing the drug, turned it over to the NIH because they couldn't figure out how to deliver the drug in any kind of a nanoparticle. NIH spent about $200 million trying to figure it out. They gave it up, and they literally gave $500 million of research to a startup company that has figured out how to encapsulate this drug so that it actually gets delivered to the cancer. And so you're looking at opportunities in drug repurposing where these pharma companies have spent literally billions of dollars looking at one indication for a drug that didn't work, but they never bothered to look at all the other possibilities for that drug because they didn't have the tools to do it. And that's where AI comes in. That's where all the genomic testing comes in. And that's where the advanced clinical trials come in. So you're literally able to pick up these assets for pennies on the dollar for real patient impact.
Yeah, I mean, just specific example from BioRock Fund 1. AN2 Therapeutics is the company we invested in. There was a drug that was brought all the way to phase 2 by Pfizer in an infectious disease, and it did not show statistically significant efficacy in the indication, the disease that they picked. This founder was familiar with the product because it was in his startup before Pfizer acquired his startup. And so he got it back from Pfizer. It was not pennies on the dollar, but it was definitely a good deal, I would say, because he ultimately did bring this from preclinical back. Now it is now in phase 3 in a completely different indication. And this is a company that went public. So yeah, I wouldn't call that necessarily repurposing, and it wasn't even fancy technology. It was simply they chose the wrong indication for the drug, right? So they tried again with the right one, and it looks great so far.
We have a question here.
Yes, thank you. Great to hear your thoughts on investments in healthcare. So, and I'm hearing a heavy leaning towards pharmaceuticals. I come from medical device industry, which is 3 to 5 years of development cycles, relatively modest investments, and similar returns. So is there a thought from panelists on why they would so heavily lean towards pharmaceutical industry or AI, which by itself doesn't treat anything, whereas these new innovative cardiovascular devices, they treat diseases that are otherwise devastating, like stroke, like heart disease, heart valves, heart failures, PE, etc. Why there is such a heavy leaning towards pharma, and why wouldn't we consider medical devices?
I will just answer that, this panel specifically may be biased towards that, right? But as I said earlier, there's about 4 different categories. And then in fact, TechCrunch last week, it was crazy. It was all about IoT, medical devices, and so on. And there was a lot of investment going on. But I'll let the panelists actually answer it.
Yeah, I think it's just, who ended up on the panel, right? My deepest area of expertise is, of course, in therapeutics. So I'm going to focus on that. If my team broadens, we would look at other things. I will say the margins on some areas, I'm not going to name names, can be not as attractive as pharma, right? So we always are a little bit more careful. And the dynamics of product development are slightly different. But there's no, all of healthcare, I think, has the same message that it's really worthwhile to invest in this space. You're helping people, and you can make money.
Thank you.
So we are actually advising a medical device company right now, and we've looked at that device in the maternal and neonatal space in the developing world, which needs this product desperately. And so by positioning this company as a resource for hospital systems and governmental healthcare systems, particularly in Africa, who would like to have this device, we are going to be sourcing serious mission capital for this company, which will not only enable it to distribute its device into Africa, but also support its domestic rollout in not only the neonatal area and the maternal area, but also across pretty much every surgical and disease category there is. So there is a role for mission capital in medical devices if there is a, as I say, if there's a mission aspect to it. But what comes over the transom for us in almost every case is not a medical device, it's a pharma opportunity. But we can look at medical devices for this structure as well.
Thank you.
And just to build on that, I think I'm seeing that as well with different companies that I'm working with. There's certainly several very interesting and very compelling medical device companies that I'm currently supporting, where they found challenges that, you know, when they approach traditional VCs, those VCs are using more of a pattern recognition approach, and which lends itself sometimes, for better or worse, sometimes better to pharma, where there's a clear track to market, it's clear to get comparables, it's clear to kind of develop the exit strategy. For some of the medical device companies, some of them have a broader global focus. Some of them, for them, it's less defined of who the actual customer will be, given the fragmented nature of the healthcare industry, especially in the US. And that has, you know, that's where they would benefit from someone who's mission driven, who can take a bet, who believes that, you know, a technology like this should exist in the world, and kind of will back that from the beginning.
Well, thanks. Actually, I have another question for Pano. In general, in United States, the FDA is like the big kahuna in the sense of the difficulties of getting things into the market. Any new regulatory aspects of how FDA is working? Is there more fast tracking like it was during the COVID time, or is this still this all very bureaucratic institution that slows things down?
So, Mary and Vadim probably have a lot more to say about this, but what I think is the difficulty with the FDA is that in the preclinical investigations, particularly those that are funded by the VC ROI investor, they're not really spending all the money that they need to spend to validate the safety or the efficacy of the drug that's being submitted to the FDA. So by the time it gets to the FDA, you know, if there's a flaw in the foundation, that flaw manifests itself when it gets to the FDA. So the real challenge is not only, you know, doing the right preclinical work, but identifying the right population for the clinical trial. And that's something that's really very, very difficult, as Vadim has referenced. The other thing I will just throw out to you, and we're looking at two companies right now that are about to go into the world of the FDA. And what we've said is, you know, you've got a product that has real veterinary applications. And while there are issues, you know, if you're treating horses or cattle or chickens or dogs and cats, A, that's not a trivial market, and B, the FDA doesn't care, and you can start your company in the veterinary space very, very quickly, a lot quicker than you can in the human space.
Yeah, so I think as Norm pointed out, you know, it is tricky to take it from whatever work you're doing before you're testing it in people, preclinical, into the clinic, and that is a pain point. I'm not sure I would necessarily, nor is Norm saying that it's the FDA's fault, but I think in general, I am actually a huge fan of the FDA. In general, and I've been in meetings with them, my own startups, and you know, as a founder, and then in bigger companies, like hearing how carefully they think about you know, the fundamental principle of our product development, as opposed to a lot of other, for example, consumer products, is you have to prove without a doubt the statistical significance in an agreed plan with an agreed endpoint. You have to show that your product works in the context that you're going to advertise it to doctors. And you have to show that it is safe and non-toxic. And so, you know, I think we should support that. right? I think that's really essential. And to the extent that there are deviations from that, you're kind of asking a little bit about what's the latest. I mean, I think there were some examples, I'm hesitant to name names, where I think a lot of us were like, how could the FDA have approved this in a neurodegeneration space? But I was pleased to see that the people involved have been sort of rolled out. No judgment on the specifics, but the fundamental piece of it is we're a disciplined industry at the core of us. We're all scientifically driven, if not actually PhD scientists. Many of us are doctors and scientists. So I do not, yes, it's a bureaucracy by definition, but I do not think negatively of them. I think they've also done a good job, good to very good, right? At thinking substantively about ways to accelerate innovation where they can, including on the tech side. I was skeptical, but they seem to be really listening on the sort of, we mentioned AI, so I'll say that again, but there's lots of other examples. And prior to that, on medtech, where there was kind of a blending of therapeutics and gadgets. For a while, they were kind of slow on that, and then they kind of figured it out, I think, right? So they have a history of being more nimble than your average bureaucracy.
That makes sense. But the good news is that when they needed to step up to the plate during the COVID time, there was definitely acceleration, and they shown that they were able to make a decision within the reasonable time, balancing the risk of adverse reactions and to solve potential problems. Do you have anything to add to the FDA and you have enough experience working with them at Pfizer, right? So.
Yeah, thanks, Arthur. I think I'm largely in agreement with everything that's been said. A few of the themes I've seen, as I think you've all pointed out, we're continuing to see accelerated approvals for anything related to COVID. I think that's been consistent. I think we've been seeing more approvals in oncology and gene and cell therapy. So I think that's been moving forward. I think where we've seen kind of FDA lean in more is real world evidence, real world data. So the use of that. And then in terms of, as we think of potential companies that may be of interest for all of us here in the room and on the panel, there's a shift more out of the hospital setting into the home. You're seeing more remote monitoring and decentralized clinical trials. And so I'm seeing some interesting companies take, kind of work on different solutions that would facilitate that in partnership with the FDA. So that's, really interesting for me. The other thing, we've highlighted the high cost, how expensive it is to get a medicine through trials. This is, again, more forward-looking, but something that I'm cautiously optimistic about is the organ on chips. And I realize that maybe, folks may have different viewpoints on this. But I think, we all can recognize that we're not large mice, and I think if you look at the low, percentage of drugs that, by the time it gets through the phase 3 trials, I think it's, the very famous statistic, it's about 5% of drug candidates get through the final stage. I'm hoping that could be technology that can improve this and actually accelerate the amounts of, as Norm pointed out, can expand the pie to address other therapies. So instead of having fewer therapies or, more therapies that treat a smaller subset of the populations, we will treat the larger subset of the population.
That sounds good. Yeah, actually, I'm a little bit advising to the company that it's a YC Combinator company that what they've done is they take, because one of the big major issues in developing anything is to have a proper data set. And because of all the HIPAA and other aspects, like we cannot compare ourselves to, let's say, like China, where there's brutally, they have access to all the DNA of their citizens and so on. But there's a YC Combinator company that has about 20 million medical records that are basically stripped off of the personal data, and they're enabling some of the pharmas to get access to that data, and therefore, and they're expanding that data set as well. So I'm seeing that there is a lot of new approaches because more we know about the diversity of the data sample, the better the therapeutics and so on. But I think that we're kind of running out of the time. So I just wanted to ask everybody.
I had a couple of questions.
Yeah, go for it.
So can you talk about the difficulty of raising capital right now in the space and the different areas? And I mean, you know, something that we're seeing, I had somebody come to me in a Series C, not healthcare, but he said, you know, there's no way I can get Series C. He said to me, because I'm looking for a strategic buyout or a strategic partner, and his terms are ridiculously favorable to the partner. So, you know, any comments? Are you seeing stuff like that, or you know, what are you seeing? It's not just for deals, but for venture capital as well.
Sure, yeah. So for our portcos, I think things have really picked up since the summer, but the last year before that, it's reflected in the broader numbers as well. There was a lot of treading water. Our portcos, you know, the milestones are a couple of years apart, so it didn't really, and they're kind of already built. Therapeutics companies already built to kind of move kind of slowly, right? So it didn't really, it was kind of like a ripple for them. They were able to continue to grow and develop their product. We also have a pretty well-developed downstream capital collective, if you will. Just, you know, the VCs who invest in therapeutics are known entities. They're very well capitalized, and you know, I happen to know all of them. We kind of know each other, right? So I think, relatively speaking, raising capital has been among friends, you know, fine, right? But it's not been, you know, awesome. Raising capital as an emerging manager of a venture fund followed that same pattern, but it's been more, you know, ups and downs. Like the highs and the lows have been bigger. So yeah, I'll let others add to that.
So for the pediatric fund, we're looking at some really interesting opportunities with the fact that you've got 200 to 300 VC funded life science companies right now that are all going to run out of money at the end of 2024. Not all of them will, but most of them will. And there are assets in those companies that are very relevant to the pediatric space that we're going to be able to source for literally pennies on the dollar. And so that's going to allow the mission funder to have that money deployed much more efficiently and much more impactfully. And it's going to give the market rate investor a lot more assurance that they are going to get their expected return.
So Norm, I actually have a question on that. You know, the 300 companies that are, you know, pretty much at, I guess they went public at phase 001.001. But if you see those guys and you look at the biotechs and the pharmas this year, you know, nobody's making any money except the, you know, the weight loss drugs. So you look at that and then you say, why, and you got to make the case, why would it be any different with yours, unless you're real smart to pick out a winner, right? Which assuming you can, but why are they different now in the environment for follow-up funding, even if you get some friends and family, than before? Isn't it sort of one of those that it's just going to be tougher?
Well, again,
now?
again, the point is that mission funding has a different agenda. It has the agenda for getting that disease solution from the bench to the patient. And if there happens to be a financial return, great. And, you know, you're looking at these assets that and not all these companies are public. A lot of them are VC funded. Some of them are public. They put in tens and, you know, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars getting these drugs into a pipeline. And they didn't do it because they're stupid. They did it because they're very smart. They thought these drugs would enter the market in a commercially successful way. It's just that the you know, if they're just looking at the ROI investor, the doors are getting shut. And so that's where the mission capital can step in what is really almost a generational opportunity to take assets that are otherwise going to be abandoned and get them to the market with smart people who are on this panel.
So I agree with Norm. I want to underline this is really a good opportunity for the mission capital piece because a lot of the things on the margins for the last year or two have been struggling. But to directly answer your question for BioRock Ventures, we always have been and always will be investing in only capital efficient founders at that very earliest stage. So we are already, to be blunt, so super cheap, even after our first investment, that in our experience, the funds that follow us are investing orders of magnitude more. And we only invest after doing due diligence that includes talking to those follow-on investors to ensure that if the company reaches the milestones as defined in our investment agreement, that they will have follow-on capital. And so they have gotten that follow-on capital. So we have a very small subset of the broader space. And this is also a great time to invest more broadly in mission as well. I agree.
Which is why, by the way, we're really excited about working with Mary. She's got such a disciplined approach, and also she does understand the mission. There are very few VC managers who understand mission. It's really quite refreshing to be able to be talking to Mary